to the New America Foundation this morning. Good morning. It's nice to see a full house. I think we've got an excellent event on store for you this morning. It's called The Next Political Era, Post-Partisanship, Progressivism, or Comeback Conservatism. And we've got a really nice lineup. We're going to keep it moving. We've got 4 packed panels with some excellent presenters. There'll be plenty of time for some vigorous Q&A, but we are going to keep things moving. So hopefully you've grabbed your lunch on your way in. If not, you can sneak out and grab it later when it's appropriate and nibble away. We're going to work this as a working lunch today, and we are joined by a virtual audience. I'd like to welcome our C-SPAN viewers who can be watching, streaming this live and also probably archived for later. So that's the logistical news and the welcome, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Phil Longman.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Phil Longman. I'm a senior fellow here at the New America Foundation, and I'm also the research director of our Next Social Contract initiative. Through a program of research and analysis, the initiative is seeking to understand how the American social contract has evolved over time, why it's failing to meet many of our current needs, and how to adjust it to the new conditions of the 21st century. It's pretty heady stuff, I must say, but the fun part is, and in many ways the most challenging, has been to try and keep up and make sense of this rapidly changing political landscape during this political season. Now think about it. Over the course of the last few years, it would have been very easy to surmise that we were headed toward an era of super partisanship. Under the tutelage of Karl Rove, the Bush administration played to its base, sought one-party rule. Meanwhile, at the other end of the spectrum, all the political energy was from the so-called netroot bloggers. And these were folks who flamed Hillary Clinton and Joe Lieberman and the centrist Democratic Leadership Council with all the same intensity that they criticized George W. Bush and Karl Rove. Many even gave Barack Obama a hard time. And their principal complaint was the Democratic establishment was insufficiently partisan. Yet here we find ourselves at this moment that many are describing as post-partisan, with the 2 front-running candidates, McCain and Obama, best known for their ability to work with and show respect for members of the opposite party. It does indeed feel like we're at the threshold of some new era in American politics. But how did we get here, and where exactly is here? Is this the beginning of a new progressive era? A new age of post-partisanship? Or are we all about to be surprised by a new kind of conservatism, what David Frum, who's with us today, calls comeback conservative? And that's what we're here to ponder today. To set up the discussion, I'll share a few words about the evolving meaning of this newly fashionable term, post-partisan, because it has a revealing history. Its earliest use seems to date to 1993, when William Safire, in his On Language column, took note of it, somewhat derisively, and attributed it to a new group called Third Millennium. And that group, which is now defunct, was part of a small but rather influential movement that, beginning in the 1980s, advocated for deficit reduction, entitlement reform, using a language of post-partisanship and sometimes generational equity. And through such institutions as the Concord Coalition, the Committee for the Responsible Federal Budget, and Third Millennium, members of this movement often stress the inability of conventional broker-style politics to deal with long-term common needs. The examples they dwelt most on at the time were the Reagan deficits, saving Social Security and controlling runaway spending. This was post-partisanship before post-partisanship was cool. Then in the 1990s, the phrase became a favorite among people like John F. Kennedy Jr. and those around him at the magazine George, who were definitely very cool. And here the association seems to have been with a politics of charisma that rose above the humdrum business of governance and party. And today, Senator Ted Kennedy's attraction to Obama may in part lie in the Kennedy's family's vision of leadership as inspiration, what moves people beyond narrow special interests. Ask not what. Still, the term remained relatively obscure to early last year when it began to appear in the mainstream media in connection with Michael Bloomberg and Arnold Schwarzenegger. The California governor that year in his State of the State address used it, declaring, "I believe that we have an opportunity to move past post-partisanship, to move past bipartisanship, and to move to post-partisanship," which he defined as Republicans and Democrats actively giving birth to new ideas together. By June of 2007, David Broder would write in the Washington Post, "What Schwarzenegger calls post-partisan politics has become the dominant culture of this capital, a shining contrast to the continuing political warfare in Washington." Then in January of 2008 came the front page above the fold, post headline, "GOP doubts, fears, post-partisan Obama." Now many might imagine that this post-partisanship has something to do with declining party loyalty. Yet here's a riddle. Because while Obama might have nice things to say about Ronald Reagan, and while McCain may be famous for crossing party lines, there's no indication whatsoever that the voters themselves are becoming less partisan. For example, according to the American National Election Studies series, the number of Americans describing themselves as independents has slowly declined since the 1980s. And claims that independents now constitute the largest segment of the American electorate rest on the rather shaky foundation of including people who describe themselves as independent Democrats or independent Republicans. In California, the percentage of independents is rising, but at such a slow pace it wouldn't be till 2025 before they eclipsed either the Democrats or the Republicans. And partisanship is rising among the young as well. In the latest UCLA Youth Survey, which is a well-followed barometer of youth trends, self-identified liberals are now up to 31.2%, which is the highest since the mid-1970s. But it also shows that self-identified conservatives are now at 25.6%, which is the highest ever. And the number that describe themselves as middle of the road has shrunk. And Republicans and Democrats divide on many other crucial issues. Partisan differences, for example, over global warming have increased from 25% to 35% over the last year. So how does it square that maverick John McCain and post-partisan Obama are on the top of their respective races? In your packs and available also on the New America Foundation website, you'll find a paper I've written on this subject. It pays particular attention to the distinct generational sensibility of the so-called Millennials, which are roughly defined as Americans born since the early 1980s. Now, if you think about it, this generation has lived through an era in which out-of-control individuals, the shooters at Paducah and Columbine, Virginia Tech, Northern Illinois, the Oklahoma City bombers, the suicide bombers, Saddam Hussein, bin Laden, and some would say George Bush II, have caused profound threats and changes to society. As Neil Howe and the late Bill Strauss have also pointed out in describing this generation, most of its members have been formed by parents and teachers who put great emphasis on cooperation and teamwork, zero tolerance of risky, offensive, or intolerant or violent behavior. These features help to explain why, as members of this generation come of age, many voice political values that stress teamwork, tolerance, civility. For example, at a recent conference of Party for the Presidency, which is a new group of ethnically and regionally diverse millennials, the following platform emerged, and it's no Port Huron statement. 1, work towards developing mutual trust and respect. Be open-minded. Take an active role and speak your mind. Keep focused on the big picture. Listen and pay attention to each other. Act with honesty and empathy. This sensibility helps to explain the fate of John Edwards, I think. By his stance on the issues, Edwards should have attracted a large liberal youth vote, yet he did not. Why? I think, though it's difficult for some boomers like me to understand, it's because of the unique political sensibility of this rising new generation of voters. Today's post-partisanship is reducible, at least in part, to a new generational politics of niceness. Millennials are more likely than older Americans to be strong liberals or conservatives. But having grown up in a world of out-of-control individuals, they are also insistent on comity and respect. This new generation fears and dislikes displays of anger, such as they saw in Edwards' stump speech. And that's one big reason, I believe, that his progressive platform fell on deaf ears and why Obama's did not. In the interest of time, I will invite you to look at the paper, which is called What Does Post-Partisanship Mean? And now I would like to turn over the platform to a man who has taken a close look at where American political opinion stands at this moment. He's a professor at the Blaustein School of Planning and Public Policy of Rutgers University, and he's also the author of a new paper commissioned by the Next Social Contract Initiative. You will find it as well in your packs or on the New America website. It's entitled American Public and the Next Social Contract, Public Opinion and Public Culture in 2007. Ladies and gentlemen, here is Cliff Zupin.
Thank you. I did write that paper, but we finished that paper about 6 months ago, and I'm not sure any of it's germane right now. There's your interesting times that we're living in. The great deal of change, and I would wager that not a single one of you is here at this same day next year, February 29th. Okay. I was asked to review public opinion, published public opinion, published by foundations, interest groups, media, academics, and to try to assess where Americans were with regard to the current political culture and social culture and where they stood on issues of the day. Those are very different things for me, and that's where I want to start this very brief talk. If you look at the title of the piece, it says Public Opinion and Political Culture. And the first thing I want to make an assertion about, a strong assertion about, is that the political culture and issues of the day are quite different. And it is the political culture and values that we need to be more concerned about in the next social contract. And that also fits in well with the notion of post-partisanship, in that while we have disagreements on issues, be they abortion or the war in Iraq, those types of issues that are position issues are very, very few and far between in the American public. We generally have positions on health care, but there are a lot of things that are acceptable with health care. We have the same thing. We don't really have positions on job stability other than it's good. We don't really have positions on education other than it's good. And then, we fight about the details. So what I'm saying is that the relationship between public opinion and public policy, that is, between what the public wants and the next social contract, is going to be played out both in the issues of, or on small issues, but mainly in the political culture. And one of the challenges of this piece was to look at all these surveys on issues and to reduce them to a set of core values that underlie them, where you can have a conversation with the American public. And so what I'm going to do today is talk about some of those values that are in the American political culture. And states have political cultures too. It may be easier to see in states. So if you've moved from the north to the south, or if you move from Oregon to Ohio to New Jersey like I did, you see very, very different cultures in terms of tolerance of corruption. Certainly it's very high in New Jersey. Even in small things like what does it mean when the light goes from the place between green and red? I mean, in Oregon it means stop the car. In New Jersey it means hit the gas. And what I'm asserting is that we as Americans have a sense of our political culture or set of rules or boundaries, and policy making takes place within that. So one of the places we started on, and if you can pull out the report, not that I want everybody flipping to the report, but there are a lot of items that we have listed here as the percentage agreeing with certain statements that are value statements. And these came by way of the Pew Center for the People in the Press that did a big report. And what we've tried to do was to go through and figure out how those statements might be reduced to a set of core values. So I'm going to talk about three things briefly today. One is the 5 or 6 core values we think are operating in the American public that any approach in the next social contract needs to be consistent with. Second is a line or two on 6 issue areas that we looked at, education, health, and so forth. And then third is sort of a very quick so what? Now that we've learned this, what does it mean for the next social contract and going forward? And then my 10 minutes will surely be up. Okay, you can yell at me if I get there faster.
Okay.
And at the outset, I would also say that what you have in front of you is a very brief paper. There are 2 large appendices that may be twice as long as this that have more statistical evidence than we could put into this. Okay, so what are the core values? If you look at the bottom of page 3, you find 90% of Americans, which is certainly a core value, that agree with the statement that society should guarantee equal opportunities to succeed. So 90% of Americans feel that way. Now, our values are contradictory. It's very easy for us to hold different ideas in our head at the same time. We do have another 69% who think government should be responsible to care for those who can't care for themselves. 7 in 10 think that government should guarantee food and shelter. It drops down to half the public if you add government should help the needy, if it means going deeper into debt. In other words, there's a cost to it. 45% say government's gone too far in pushing equal rights. What we come down to in terms of a value statement, though, is that we have a commitment to ensuring equality of opportunity, very different than ensuring equality of outcomes, but ensuring that everybody has it within their ability to succeed. Government should at least make that possible. And while we're committed to altruism on the one hand, we also have an extremely deep commitment to self-reliance, individualism, and entrepreneurship on the other. So we are an earn-as-you-go society. We don't believe that things should be given away except for guaranteeing that people don't completely fail. Next, we have a commitment to the public sector along with awareness of it. So 70% think that U.S. strength is based mainly on the success of American business, and 70% also agree there's too much power concentrated in the hands of big companies. So we're in a capitalistic system, and we want business to deliver most of the goods and services. We do want government to watch them. But again, that will play out in terms of how the discussion of healthcare delivery is framed in the roles that we now think are proper for big government and also for big corporations. One of the things that makes us uniquely American, and I threw this in and we had a discussion about whether I should, we left it in because it's so fun, is that we have a firm belief in God, along with a belief in the separation of church and state. But 80% in this country describe themselves as religious. And in one of the statistical appendices, there's a wonderful chart that on the one hand shows the wealth of a nation and the percent religiosity in a nation. And the United States is clearly an outlier. In other countries, this line falls that the more wealth you have, the less you need Jesus or God. In the United States, that's just not true. So it does help explain why an element of religious debate tinges our political discussions, in that we are a very unique society in that way. And then we also believe that it's okay for income inequalities to exist. And that's one of the reasons that it is the poor people who are the most strongly against the inheritance tax. They think they may get rich one day. But it doesn't bother us that some people have more than others. We don't have great support for a leveling of the economic playing field at that level. And finally, we continue to believe that we should have an aggressive place in the world, although Iraq is making us rethink that, and we're probably headed in for a period of isolationism and pulling back. So those are some of the core values that really drive us that the next social contract has to be consistent with. Let me give you a line or two about the 6 issue areas we looked at, and because I'm going to get to them in a so what phase at the end. Education is the first issue we looked at. It is an absolute birthright issue. It is a core issue. People feel entitled to primary and secondary education. And it's funny, when people talk about the problems there are in the education system in this country, they're largely talking about social problems of crime and gangs. They're not talking about the delivery of educational services. And when people look at the job the federal government is doing in delivering education in Washington, it's not very good. It gets much better when they're asked to rate their state. It gets very good indeed when they're asked to rate their communities. So the closer they look at education, the better they feel about it. But again, education, we know little about education in terms of higher education. We know little about lifelong education, which is going to become an increasingly large issue as we have transformations of the workforce. Social security and retirement income. These, I think, are the most painful data in the report. This is the elephant in the room and the donkey in the room that people don't talk about. They no longer believe that Social Security is going to be there for them, and they haven't believed that for years. The timeline, when you look at data on what people feel about the Social Security system, is a flat line that hasn't moved in 30 years. People believe they're going to have to be responsible for their own retirement. They don't think government's going to help them very much in doing that, and they don't have a clue as to how to do it. Okay, so that's why it's the elephant in the room. They know they're not saving. They don't think anybody else is going to help them. There are a lot of people who are living hand to mouth and trying to eke by, and they don't have a notion of how they're going to save money for this. And in that sense, it's a big unmet need, but it is something that people find very painful to talk about, so it's hard to have that conversation. Taxes and spending. Am I getting close?
Getting close, yeah.
Okay.
It's okay.
Taxes and spending, another painful issue. It's a fascinating issue in that people believe that they're overtaxed. They believe that the tax system is unfair. They believe that the tax system is overly complicated, and they don't want to hear any discussion about changing the tax system. You know, there's almost no way to approach that issue because what they believe is that the rich will get richer, I will get hurt, that even though it's unfair and complicated, something that comes along could be worse. And so they really don't even want to talk about taxes. Healthcare, on the other hand, they want to talk about, and healthcare is becoming a critical issue. It is rivaling the economy as a domestic issue, as a pocketbook issue. And there are twin concerns. You know, one is cost, and the other is access. People are more concerned about cost. We see it more in secondary ways where they're concerned about changing jobs and giving up health care and increased costs of health care. We have only 8% in this country who say the health care system works fine as it is. It needs only minor change. There's half the public that says it needs a major change. There's a third of the public that says it needs to be scrapped altogether. So health is becoming just a huge issue. I think that's why you see it playing out in the campaign and getting so much ink, is that it's a genuine gut-level issue for people. Job satisfaction and economic security. Job satisfaction's okay. Job satisfaction is better than it should be. 80% say in some measure that they're fine with their job, that they're satisfied with their job. Now it's true that half of those are just very satisfied and half are just somewhat satisfied. Job security, though, I don't think we have a good way to measure it, and Reed Kramer and I have talked about this, about how to measure job insecurity. We don't have good data on this. We don't know what people are fearful of, and we don't know how fearful we are, and we may take that on as a next project. The environment, A wonderful second-tier issue, a line I tried to keep in there and editors tried to throw out, was that everybody wants to take the environment out on a date, but no one wants to marry it. It's very, very difficult to see the environment elevated to a top-tier issue. If it does, it will be around finances and economics and dependency on oil rather than niceties. And Reed's telling me I have 2 minutes to do this, so. Oh, okay. So do I have 3 minutes? No, I'm still over. Okay. So that's the quick tour through the issues, and then now the quick so what? What does this mean for the next social contract? I think it's good for the next social contract. You know, I'm a very big believer in only out of crisis do you get non-incremental change. And I think we're headed to a point where the American public will entertain non-incremental change for a variety of reasons. One is the mood of the country is decidedly sour. We have 30% who think the country's going in the right direction. We have a president whose job performance is at 30%. We have a public who's tired of George Bush to the point where they're not listening to him. We have a public who's tired of the war in Iraq, and they don't even care how the war in Iraq is settled. They just want it to go away. You know, I don't want to deal with this. And in that sense, it gives you the possibility. There has been a shift in the importance of the economy to almost record proportions, and the shift has hit home just in the last month in terms of public opinion. Economic indicators were there. But if you looked at the Pew News Interest Index for last month, you found changes of 15 and 20% in the percentage who say this is a good time to get a job, this is a good time to sell a house. Public opinion usually does not change that quickly in a month. And what happens is it seems that the public is caught up with the housing crisis and is worried about jobs. And so you're getting the sense that, you know, we are in crisis economic times. And again, that's when you can have more than incremental reform of policy. Third, I was arguing this to Reed maybe half a year ago. He thought this was interesting and asked me to document it more. I said the public is willing to put 9/11 behind us. I think if I had waited for Rudy Giuliani's campaign, I wouldn't have had to go assemble all those data. There are a lot of indicators of the American public that changed after 9/11. The importance of health, the importance of this, the importance of this. And the further we got from 9/11, they all reconverged. In a sense, that's good. In a sense, that's bad. They have come back to the levels that they were at before 9/11, meaning that we missed an opportunity to stir the pot. Things got stirred up, but then resettled exactly where they were, rather than having any fundamental change. But we are ready to move beyond us. And
I think you're there.
I think I'll stop there and invite you to read the report and say that I've liked working with the New America Foundation people very much. Thanks.
Great. I'd like to open it up to questions if anyone has one.
Speak into the microphone.
I'm sorry. Is this on? Is that fine? Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. Cliff, I'll just ask you a quick question that perplexes me. When you look at this data on how young people look at the world, in many ways they seem very progressive, but there's big anomalies. For example, support for the right to an abortion is much lower among young women and men than it is among older folks. And also there's a tremendous expressed desire to start your own business. And I was wondering if you could speak to that. What do you make of that?
Yeah. Well, they're different. Colleagues and I ended up writing a book Oxford University Press published called A New Engagement that looked at young people in both civic and political engagement. And here are some of the ways that they're different, and you alluded to some of them. One is they're far more tolerant. They've grown up in diverse places. This is normal to them. It's not abnormal to them. They really think, so what about a black person running for president? They don't view politics in the same terms of race and class as other generations. They are more liberal and more progressive. They're willing to see an expanded role for the federal government in solving problems. They are going to be worse citizens, and in that they pay attention less, they participate less. Civically, they're very good citizens. Politically, they're going to be worse citizens in making demands of government. And it does raise the question about the social contract, because the social contract is not only what people expect from government, but what they're willing to put in from government. So they have all those qualities going on. They are also more entrepreneurship. They don't want to work for someone, yet they're very comfortable working in teams because they've been doing that all their life. Leisure is more important to them rather than a job. So if you do a generational analysis and you say, you know, how important is each of these, having a good time is more fun to them. They're less duty-bound about employment. They're going to be different in a lot of ways.
Yeah, right there, blue tie.
Yes, hi, Ned Hodgman with Understanding Government. I was interested in your remark that these issues will be played out in the political culture. And I was wondering if you're saying that they will be played out in the political culture as opposed to through debates about specific issues, and how that works. Thank you.
Yeah, I meant to be clear that I think the political culture serves as a passive restraint, or like a seatbelt. It is the line over which politicians will not go in talking about things. And then within that line, within those sets of values, many policy debates are possible. Then it becomes what symbols get attached to what ideas. You know, there are some things to stay away from. You stay away from big government, you stay away from big anything. There are some ways to talk that have to do with government helping people rather than doing things for people. And in that sense, the values in the political culture play out more in rhetoric and communication in the discussion of issues than in the specific policy proposals themselves.
We have time for one more question. Right there, please.
Peggy Orchowski, I'm at the Hispanic Outlook on Higher Education. I wonder if you looked at not only the role of government, but how this new generation is looking at sovereignty, at national sovereignty. I have the feeling that globalization to them means, it doesn't mean international. It doesn't have the nation state in mind. It goes beyond nationhood. So in that way, do you find that this generation is, I hate to use the word patriotic, maybe we should say loyal to even the idea of American values, American culture, and the American state?
I don't think particularly so. And again, I think that there are 2 points. One is that they don't even know what they are. You know, it's not that the dutifuls who were defined by World War II or the baby boomers who came through civil rights and the war in Vietnam. These guys don't really have they have a sense of us, but they don't know who the they is. And the second thing that I guess want to make clear, and be happy to leave with this point, is that it's unclear to me if they are going to ever view government the same way as they view the market. You know, there are some functions that I think they are more comfortable with the market providing rather than government providing, as opposed to their older kins. And I think that would come through in terms of globalization, because the jobs they get in the economic forces are going to be much more tinged by globalization than any new combination of governments overseas.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, we'll do a quick change here for our second panel. Want to get the panelists up, but please join me in thanking Cliff Zukin and Phil Longman for their remarks. A lot of